Zoom are recording. Okay, it's 12:33, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Um, we are here for the transitional housing services for transitional aged youth request for proposals information workshop today. Um, little housekeeping. Cheryl, I made you a co-host, so folks are coming in. Can you admit them? We are recording, so we will post this to our YouTube page and post the materials on our website. There isn't a huge amount of slides to go through, so there's lots of time for questions at the end. And with that, I will get to it. Okay, so our agenda, we're going to do a quick welcome and intro. We're going to do some background and overview of this RFP and get into some of the details within the documents. And then, like I said, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. So in terms of introductions, my name is Jamie Schechter. I'm a homeless services chief here with Contra Costa Health Housing and Homeless Services. I use she, her pronouns. And I'll pass it over to Cheryl.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cheryl Leonore with the Continuum of Care Group, work on contracts and grants, and I'm a health services administrator.
And if folks could drop their name and agency affiliation into the chat, that will be really helpful in tracking attendance for us and let us know who's in the room. Okay. So, a quick overview of the timeline. We released this RFP on July 1st. We posted it on our website. We sent it out over email, I think July 2nd in the morning, got it out there. And then today is our informational workshop. It is not mandatory. So if you're working with folks who are like, oh gosh, we didn't get a chance to go, or are we out of the running? The answer is no. It's just helpful as a chance to get to know what's in there. We're also holding office hours next Monday. So if you're working through things and you've got kind of questions that you think could be answered, please feel free to drop into those. Again, not required. By July 11th, we would like you all to have your questions to us, any questions in writing that you want us to document answers to, so that we can put them out there on the website with an FAQ document shortly thereafter. And then finally, this is due July 25th. Apologies for the short timeline. There's been a lot of changes to this RFP and to this process, and it delayed us a little bit further than we wanted to. But our goal is to get these services up and running by October 1st. So we need to be really in the process of contracting and with a provider in August. So we're going to be moving quickly. After applications are submitted, we'll be reviewing applications and conducting applicant interviews so that we can meet our timeline. Any questions on this component? I'm going to stop often for questions, but if you don't have them, you can always ask them a little bit later too. Okay, so the purpose of the RFP overall, we're looking for proposals from qualified nonprofits to administer the transitional living program and other housing services to transition-age youth aged 18 to 24 at various locations in Contra Costa. Residents in the Contra Costa Health Program, Transitional Housing Program, work with our team to create personalized plans focusing on education, employment, life skills, and more. Additional services include case management, community service opportunities, counseling, peer support groups, family reunification, and mental health services. I want to particularly call out, we work with young folks in our Youth Action Board and residents at our transitional housing and emergency shelter programs, and they really emphasized employment, healthcare connections, mental health services as key services they're looking for within the providers who apply. So, as I said, we worked with these folks. We did a focus group with our YAB, our Youth Action Board. We had focus groups with Cali House and Pomona apartment residents. Those are emergency shelter and transitional housing residents. Our YAB members will participate on the review panel, and I just really want to emphasize that youth and young adult advocacy helped us get to this point. They really fought hard for the Board of Supervisors to allocate funding to youth transitional housing, and they're really invested in this work, and really want to thank them for all their work in that. Some of the required components. The full details of this are in section 3 of the RFP. We will not read it line for line. We don't have enough time for that, and I don't want to put you all to sleep. But I want to highlight that there's a lot in here. Required services include providing transitional housing to transition age youth age 18 to 21. And I know some of you might be going, wait, but I thought this was for 18 to 24. Yes. Our Pomona Apartments program, which is kind of one of the key pieces of this RFP, has age restrictions to 18 to 21. What we're hoping to do with this RFP, and we're hoping we wrote it flexibly enough, is to see what else there might be able to be added onto that could serve youth up to 24. Whether that's something like a transitional housing program somewhere else, maybe you've got, another location and you could have a few beds there, or it's rapid rehousing services that you'd be able to tack on to Pomona Apartments, anything in that regard that could expand that age range. But due to federal funding we have for Pomona, the age range there is 18 to 21. And like I said earlier, youth and young adults place strong emphasis on mental health support, connection to healthcare, and connection to employment. We really require compliance with our funding streams. Particularly, I want to highlight the federal runaway and homeless youth funding. That's the thing that's keeping us at that 18 to 21 range. It's also one of our longer term, more sustainable funding sources that we have. And so this is a key one to make sure we're maintaining compliance there. And of course, for folks who do this and have worked with H3, participation in HMAS is required. That might seem like a no-brainer, but I do want to highlight that for everybody. Some of the application components. Again, full details in section 3 of the RFP, but I want to give you a little bit of the breakdown. We have a cover letter. That's a form that comes with the documents. You don't have to write like paragraphs of narrative. It's just a form that goes on top of the application. Scope of services, understanding and experience. That's up to 25 points. Team member qualifications, again, up to 25 points. And I would like to just highlight in that section, make sure that there's an org chart attached. There's narrative that must go along with this section, but an org chart is one of those required components that you might be able to just gloss over easily if you're reading quickly through the RFP. Familiarity with federal, state, regional, and local agency compliance and procedures, up to 12 points. Quality of work, technical ability, up to 18 points. Financial responsibility, reporting, budget, and schedule tracking, up to 20 points. And then a couple extra forms that are included that are appendixes and exhibits that are just kind of standard county forms. They're not scored, but they are required. And again, I really want to emphasize that youth voice is really present here. They highly, highly emphasized the team member qualifications and the scope of services as key characteristics that they're going to be reading for when reviewing applications. So those are the biggest chunks of points there. Application submission. I almost got all the RFQs and changed them to RFPs, but it's an RFP. Before submission, make sure that all of your components are there. There's a lot of nitty-gritty things in applications, I know, and it's easy to, like I said, gloss over and skip something. So just make sure you do that review. Email all the materials to homelessprogram@cchealth.org, ideally in a PDF with a budget that's in Excel. But that's not required as it's written in the RFP, so we won't hold you to that if it's, in various PDF files or whatnot, but one PDF would be great. That will reduce your chances of getting filtered out for too big of files and things like that. So just helpful advice. Everything's due at 5 p.m. on Friday, July 25th. So hopefully people don't try and wait till the last minute and then our emails get it at 5:10. Make sure you're putting in enough buffer time to account for slow internet feeds and all that. And no changes or additions to the RFP response may be made after the submission date. So once it's in, it's in. All questions you might have as you're going through this document can go to homelessprogram@cchealth.org. I see some new faces in the room, so I just want to call out homeless program, not programs with an S, homeless program at cchealth.org through July 11th. We'll post all our materials where you've probably seen the RFP posted on our website, and I put it there in the full URL link on our funding page, and we will be hosting the materials from this information workshop there. And that was all the content I had. I told you it was going to be short, so you all have plenty of time to ask your questions. Is there any part of this presentation you'd like to return to? Anybody in the room, feel free to raise your hand or drop it in the chat, and we can go back to it, or feel free to open up the floor for questions. Larry, I see your hand up.
I have a very simple question. How does this particular program differ from the program we already operate for transitional age youth ages 18 to 21 who are non-minor dependents? I mean, the services seem quite similar, so I'm just curious, like, what's really different here?
When you say we, can you speak to kind of who you're referring to?
Well, I'm the executive director of Quest Programs, and we operate STEPS, which is the transitional age youth program serving non-minor dependents in remote site apartments.
Hmm.
So, so yeah, we're already, helping 18 to 21-year-olds. So I'm just curious, like how this is different.
Great. So that might be a very similar program to what you're currently operating, but this is currently serving youth who are living at Pomona Apartments, and that is
Mm,
an apartment building in Crockett, California. So we
mm.
would be having a service provider take over case management and things like that at that location.
I see. How many apartments are there?
Oh gosh, I should have had this right at the tip of my fingers. There is, I believe, 11 to 13 young people there.
Oh,
Man,
okay.
that was
Okay.
not supposed to be a gotcha question, I know, and yet it got me.
Uh,
But I believe it's 11 to 13.
Okay. And they're non-minor dependents?
They are transition age youth. I
Oh,
don't
I
know that
see.
all of them are non-minor dependents,
Okay.
but they are transition age youth from 18 to 21.
I see. Okay. All right. Thank you.
And Ms. Yvonne, I see your hand up. And then Julie, I see you after
Yes.
that.
Good afternoon, everyone. I was having some Zoom technical difficulties trying to log on. What happened in the first 5 minutes?
In the first 5 minutes, we welcomed everybody. What part did you step into?
You were talking mighty fast, so I think you came in on the uh, application process.
Great.
Okay.
So we talked a little bit about what the required components of this RFP are, including transitional housing services for TAY 18 to 21 at Pomona Apartments. And then we wrote this RFP with the flexibility for folks to provide extra services if they're able to, leverage resources or augment the program as it is to serve that full 18 to 24 age range.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And Julie.
Who's the operator right now?
Oh, that's a great question. H3 currently operates this program. So we
Okay.
are looking to transition those services to a nonprofit partner.
Okay, and is a licensed clinician on staff or on site an expectation?
It would be highly recommended. Young people did call out that mental health support, including therapy, which would require clinical licensure, as a key component. And I would highly recommend verifying the RI requirements, the Runaway and Homeless Youth funding requirements.
And finally, is there a budget template?
There is not, but we can, Cheryl, wait, correct me. Did we post a budget template?
We did not.
We did not. So we welcome you all using one. And if you would find one helpful, we can post one up as well. So use what you're comfortable with, or we will also post optional budget template.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Derek, I see your hand up, and then Tanya.
Yes, I just had a question. I want to clarify the ratio and supervision requirement. It was 24 hours, but exactly what is the ratio and what qualifying staff would you need on site?
Sure. So it is 24 hours. We would expect support services to be there, basically at least a 40-hour work week sort of thing. But 24-hour site supervision is required, as well as kind of those protocols in place if incidents occur to loop in support services staff and landlord issues and things like that. So that's the 24-hour kind of component. And then I believe we aim for a 1:15 ratio of staff to youth.
Okay, okay. And then how long has this program been operating?
Oh gosh, I want to say that we've been operating for quite a while, for many years at this point, and Deanne, you probably can get a better ballpark than I can at this point. But I want to say we've been operating since 2016. That's what's coming to my mind, but I could be wrong. But it's been several years. It's a longstanding program of H3s. And I apologize, I was a little frazzled today in getting to the office, so had some earlier appointments. I didn't have documents all in order. But it's been several years. It's not a brand new program. We've kind of built Pomona up for a while.
Okay, and another nonprofit was operating it before, or was it county operated?
So it was county operated. We contract as the county with a fiscal agent called Haluna Health to hire staff and do things like that, but it was a county operated program. We consider it our program.
That was it, thank you.
All right, Tanya, I see your hand up, and then Luis.
Good afternoon, everyone. I was wondering, for the current participants, are the individuals, or is this open to families, or have there been families or parenting youth in those places as well?
You're a little quiet. Would you mind repeating the question so I make sure I'm hearing it correctly?
Yeah, does the program currently accept or has accepted, is it just for individual TAY, or is it for families or parenting?
It's for individuals. So youth with minor dependents, I don't believe are living at Pomona currently. And then Luis.
Hi, Jamie. Good afternoon, everyone. So I have a couple questions, Jamie. So hopefully they're just quick, kind of yes or no answers. Okay. So kind of going back to you said there was about 11, 13 youth that are living there. Are these 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartments?
They are shared apartments, I believe. And I will make sure in our FAQ to call out anything that I might be getting wrong off the cuff. I should probably say, I'll get back to you, but I know that's a frustrating answer here. So
you're thinking the
they are
roommate
shared
model?
living situations.
Okay. Now, when you say 24 hours, but then you talk about a 40-hour week, are you saying that are you referring to like on call, like somebody doesn't have to live there, on site, but there just has to be a system for somebody to respond after 5 o'clock at any time?
No, what I'm saying is that there needs to be staffing on site, similar to shelter attendants, desk clerks. So they don't need to be case management staff 24/7, but there does need to be staffing 24/7. And then those case management clinical staff could be there for fewer hours during the week. They don't need to be 24/7, but there does need to be protocols to, respond to emergencies and crises.
So for the staff that are there, like, is there like that's housing that's provided to them within the building, like it is in a single site, for example?
Not currently.
No, okay. And then another question is just, is this all like strictly a TAY complex, or is it like a mixed population where you have people from the general public that might rent some units, or is it strictly just TAY?
It's all transitional aged youth.
Okay. All right, and then I think the last one that I had was just, is this building like owned by the county, or is it some type of like corporate lease that the provider would take over and then kind of assume the role of, you know, operating, essentially being the lease signer and then or co-owner in some respects?
It is a leased
Landlord.
building.
Mhm.
It is owned by a local landlord.
Okay,
And we would work with the provider to figure out whatever situation works best for all parties.
got it. Okay. Great, thank you.
And then Larry, I see your hand up.
Oh, hi. In terms of budgeting, is there a rate of compensation per bed or per client, or how is compensation determined?
We do not have a bed rate for the budget. We are looking to providers to tell us what this program will cost, so we can see how far we can stretch our dollars. You know, based on 24 staffing, we gave you a figure, a standard figure in the RFP to use for that rent occupancy cost. And then we would like to know, given the program components, you know, what is your staff in your staffing ratios? What does it look like to operate this program?
I see. Okay.
And then Derek, I see your hand up.
I just had a clarifying question. So the qualifying staff on site don't have to be mental health staff. They can be, I guess I think you refer to them as attendants or.
For the 24/7 coverage, you know, we don't need like a licensed clinical social worker doing that overnight graveyard shift necessarily. They can be folks who are just kind of on-site monitoring the apartments and being there to be that on-call person when if something happens overnight. But we would be very interested in kind of hearing the proposed program structure that applicants have for this, of how they would best kind of meet that need.
And then the office space that's available, is it inside one of the units or what does that look like?
There is a front building, and then it's kind of a multi-building kind of situation where like the front building kind of looks like a storefront, and then like the back building has apartments, and then there's a garage we also rent for storage.
Are you able to provide the address?
I can look into that to see if we're able to make that public. It is in Crockett, and it's off the freeway. Charles, then Larry.
Hi, Jamie. I just have a couple quick questions. One about the insurance requirements. I did see it was listed in the RFP. I was just wondering if there was anything outside the scope of the county's general terms and conditions that would be required for the contractor's insurance policies. I know they got some basic stuff listed in there, but we're just wondering if there was additional stuff that's required as a part of the contract that'll be awarded here.
That's a great question, and I probably cannot give you a complete answer. One thing I will call out that has surprised some of our contractors in the past is that participating in HMIS, our Homeless Management Information System, requires a cyber liability insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one component that I can't recall if that was specifically called out in the RFP, but that's standard. And I can make sure that we give a more complete answer in the FAQ. We'll take that question.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jamie. And then one other question, is H3 open to proposals that would include a subcontracting element for this this RFP?
Yeah, I think we are. If there are great partnerships that are put forward in an application, I think that would be definitely something that's would be an interesting application to look through.
Great. Thanks so much, Jamie.
Larry, is that a new hand or an old hand?
Yes, it's a new question. Is there a reason why this particular apartment complex and these units are being used rather than units elsewhere?
We have a really great relationship with the landlord, and it's been a good location for us. So that's where the program has been cited for many years at this point. We know that the price of real estate in the county is high. We
Mhm.
recently had to close a different transitional housing program called Mary McGovern back in September. Oh gosh,
Mhm.
that's almost a year ago at this point. And we couldn't find another location that was affordable. So that is
Okay.
what it boils down to mostly.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, what I'm wondering is it ever possible to use locations selected by the provider, by the service provider?
I think that's something that if you're finding ways to leverage different locations and to expand capacity of the program, that could be something that you speak to in the application.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mhm. Julie. And then Riley?
Riley.
Are the participants paying anything towards rent?
They contribute to a savings account right now. And so when they exit the transitional housing program, they are able to leave typically oftentimes with like a security deposit and some rent money saved up. But that is the kind of contribution they're making, not to rent, but to their savings account. Riley.
Yeah, so I've got a few questions. The rent that is currently being paid by H3 with the landlord that you've got a good relationship with, is the relationship good enough? Do you think that the rent would stay similar price, or are they going to jack up the rent for
That's
the
a
new
great
person?
question. I will say that the landlord's been very flexible and worked with us very well over the last few years. And of course, as any property owner, sometimes that rent goes up, but they've been very reasonable over the years. And that's something that we can definitely work out through the contract negotiations.
Well, so for budgeting purposes, can we have like a ballpark number?
Yeah, we
rent
gave
there?
that number in the RFP. We recommend using $20,000 a month as the figure that you use for rent in your budget. And that's not like the precise amount we're paying right now. We just gave everybody a nice round number to use.
Okay, gosh, I missed that part of the RFP. I saw how many bed nights per year, but I didn't catch that. What section was that in? So I could,
I believe it's in the section 3 in
Okay.
the kind of submission instructions.
okay,
for-
thank you so much. I
You're
appreciate that. Now, will vouchers, the VIP vouchers be required for placement to this program or no?
VIP vouchers?
Yeah. So your response is immediately telling me that's not used.
Right, yeah, I'm curious. What
Okay.
is that kind of
Okay.
referring?
All right, that's fine. No vouchers required.
Yep.
And so the funding, where does it come from? Who pays for
Great
this?
question. Yeah, so funding, we have a little bit of local Measure X dollars that come from sales tax. We have runaway and homeless youth funding, that is federal funding. So make sure folks are familiar with that those federal funding requirements. Look up runaway and homeless youth if you are not. We have some funding that comes from the State Homeless Housing Assistance Program, HAP. We have some funding from our local behavioral health agency. We have some funding from our probation department to serve justice impacted youth. So
Okay,
it's a really big puzzle of our funding sources, and that's why having kind of that sophistication with navigating compliance around all the various funding sources will be important. And whatever leveraged resources our providers can bring in will be very helpful.
okay. There was a statement, and maybe it was just the way I was reading it, something about, it sounded as if someone else was going to make the plan with the residents on, what their goals were. Did I read that correctly, or is that all part of the case management?
That is part of the case management.
Okay.
There's lots of different ways that folks can provide that service. And some folks use peer support, some folks use case managers. It can be done many different ways. So we're looking forward to see all the various program designs that are coming to us. But that is a service we're expecting of the nonprofit we partner with.
Okay, and one last question. Are there any eligibility requirements that are associated with H3, or is it primarily for each of the funding streams? We need to look and see what those are.
It's primarily for each of the funding streams.
Okay.
And so that's why I'm really calling out the 18 to 21 age range that is serving Pomona right now, or that Pomona is serving right now, because that is a requirement on the funding source of our runaway and homeless youth funding source, and that's the most restrictive funding source.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay. Derek, then Charles, and then Larry, if that's a new hand, we'll get you after Charles. Derek, was that an old hand?
Yeah, no, yeah, sorry, I was getting it unmuted. So is there ever a need for double coverage, and how are the clients being placed? So are these emergency placements that are in the middle of the night sometimes, or are these prearranged placements?
Yeah,
Uh,
these referrals will go through coordinated entry, and they are coming from our shelters, our core teams, those sorts of programs. So folks are exiting homelessness into this transitional housing situation. Middle of the night, I don't think that would be common, if at all, happening. But you never say never to anything, but that would not be a normal occurrence by far.
okay. Um, okay, okay. At the end, are these low-level clients that only need 40 hours of supervision during the week, or do some of them have severe mental disorders that can cause sprints of dysregulation, property destruction, things like that?
So there are folks who have complex needs, but it is meant to be an independent living program, cooperative living, obviously, because there's, shared communal spaces. So, it's not necessarily that folks who need kind of high level, more appropriate to kind of healthcare setting would be placed here. But there are definitely young people who have mental health needs, physical health needs, and will rely on staff for supports that they're able to provide, if that helps answer that question. Charles.
Thanks, Jamie. I just had one follow-up question. In regards to programs that are run for the youth, you mentioned the youth savings accounts. Would the awarded contractor be expected to take on administration of programs like that or any other stipends, issued to the youth?
We would expect the awarded provider to kind of adhere to best practices. So while that's not necessarily a required component of running transitional housing, we've seen it be very successful for young people. We would expect to see young people compensated for lending their expertise if the provider does things like surveys, focus groups, or asks youth to kind of step up in a different way. But there's lots of different ways to run transitional housing programs, so we're open to what that might look like. But the goal is to get folks living on their own out of Pomona, out of transitional housing, permanent housing, and financial education, money management. Those sorts of life skills are a really key foundation of these programs.
Thanks, Jamie.
Deanne.
Hi, thanks for all your time. I have a few questions as well. Just one thing for the FAQ, it would be really helpful if you could get really explicit about the configuration of the building, how many units, how many ones and twos, what the common spaces are, things like that. So we've talked a lot about the Pomona piece. Can you talk a little bit more about section 2B? The other services that H3 is looking for and what funding is available for those services? What's the budget that we're sort of working with there?
Yeah, so what we're looking for is something that can be used to augment our transitional housing program. And we're really interested in seeing, do providers have a way to do this affordably, such as scaling existing programs to maybe add a couple rapid rehousing slots to transitional housing? Or do you have a house you're already operating and a couple of extra beds could be added on as transitional housing? We would likely be using our HAP and our Measure X dollars, so it's a little bit more flexible. But our primary goal, again, is to make sure that Pomona is sustained. It has residents currently there. And as many of you know, most of homeless services funding is one time. So things like HAP, they are given by the state and then they go away after a certain number of years. So we don't want to go too big and then have to scale back and be very disruptive to young people who are relying on services. So we really want to see what is it looking like to augment and make sure we can serve that 18 to 24, and working within a budget of kind of ways that can be used with things that can be used with one-time funding, things that can be stood up and stood down as resources are used. We do not have a firm dollar figure right now.
Have a ballpark? I mean, or I mean, the way it's written, it sounds like you're asking providers just to show up with other resources.
We are asking providers
Augment.
to show up with other resources for sure.
But it's unclear if H3 has some funding to put towards this section 2, or if you're really asking providers to just bring all of it separate.
We're asking providers to show up with other resources for sure. We would not be asking them to show up with all of it.
Okay.
Some of this will depend on HAP a little bit, and that's why I'm being a little wishy-washy. We haven't gotten our full approval from the state. They only approved a smaller portion for the next round of HAP, so some of the funding that goes within the youth set aside there is squishier. But we know, for example, our RIE funding is about $250,000 a year, or $250,000 every year. We know that our behavioral health, our probation, our transitional living program dollars are bed nights. So depending on the youth you're serving there, it can be drawn down. And that's why the puzzle gets a little bit harder, but we can aim to get you all a more clear kind of ballpark in the FAQ.
Okay. And given the last week's passage of the big federal bill, which guts Medicaid, is that changing H3's stance on prioritizing programs that are leveraging CalAIM resources?
CalAIM is one of the sources that folks can demonstrate their leveraging, but if there are others, we're looking to prioritize agencies that can leverage other resources, full stop. So if it's private dollars, if it's Medi-Cal billing, if it's, other private grants, not just, individual fundraising, if it's physical assets like a house, then that's
Okay.
what we're looking to prioritize.
And then one last question, and it's just a small technical question. Can the org chart be included as an attachment rather than as a page count? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. The org chart can be an attachment and not go against the page count.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Katie and then Larry.
Sorry about that. Are the current participants already connected to mental health providers, or will you be responsible for all of mental health services as a provider?
It could be a referral that you're making. So our participants, not all of them, of course, but those who seek those services are connected to mental health support. It is participant centered, so nobody's required to partake in mental health clinical services. If someone changes their mind, that would be a responsibility of the provider.
Okay. And then for the 40 hours, what types of services are you expecting, and what are the hours and days expected for those on-site services?
We would look to providers to tell us that. What's in the RFP are the services I kind of named earlier on, and I'll go back a little bit. So we're, education, employment, life skills, case management, community service opportunities, counseling, peer support, family reunification, mental health services. These are kind of those required components that we're looking for. And I threw 40 hours out there to give folks kind of the ballpark, but please put forward your program model, how you best think transitional housing should be run to adequately meet the needs of youth living here.
Thank you.
Larry, then Alex.
I've heard the term Medi-Cal billing mentioned. Will providers be granted a behavioral health or mental health contract associated with this project?
We cannot say that providers will receive a contract from behavioral health. If you are a Cal-AIM provider as contracted with Contra Costa Health Plan or Kaiser, then you may be able to seek reimbursement for services that are community supports that youth may qualify for. And that I think was more of what we were referencing a little bit earlier.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Alex.
Jamie, thank you. You spoke a little bit about this before, but just get a little finer point on it. So the funding is HAP, which is not always guaranteed, but the RHY funding is. So clearly this is an RFP for 12 months. But what are the long-term plans, even just in thinking, if not in writing?
I mean, the long-term plans are to do what we always do with our one-time funding and make sure we patch it and make sure we're keeping track of things. So we really will look at budget and budget narrative to see kind of what an organization's history is and how they're making sure that funding and compliance is there. Because we know that one of the best ways to get more funding is to be really good at managing previous funding. And so we will work with providers to continue to pursue new funding opportunities. Our youth, like I said, have done a tremendous job of advocating for more county resources to go towards these programs, and they continue to do that as the board is working through some other funding decisions recently. So there may be more funding available locally, and we will continue to work with our providers to pursue new ones. And again, we're prioritizing Pomona here because that's what we have, and we don't want to be standing up new programs without assurance that they're able to last. I don't know if that was a finer point, Alex, but it might have just been me talking a little bit longer.
Every little bit helps, Jamie. Thank you.
Mhm. Larry, is that a new hand or an old hand? I think that's an old hand. Luis.
Hey, Jamie. So yeah, all of these questions, really just kind of trigger other questions. They've been a lot of excellent questions. If I read it correctly, just kind of looking at my notes here, it sounded like some of the criteria for the youth is that they needed to be enrolled in a full service partnership as a contingency for them to be there. Is that
To
correct?
be enrolled in the beds that are
Mhm.
behavioral health contract funds. So we have some beds that are RI funded,
Oh, got it. Okay.
behavioral health, some that are probation. So we blend the funding to kind of put
Okay.
all the beds together.
So the next question was around like the those that are being released from the youth academy. So that's tied to the probation funds. Okay. Got it. Okay. Thank you.
If you haven't already, please make sure you put your information in the chat. We'll make sure to send out all the materials to all the all the registrants, as well as post it on our website. We'll work at getting an FAQ developed. That's why we are recording this as well, to make sure that we can go back and answer any questions we weren't able to, correct any things that might have been said off the cuff if we need to. And it also incorporate any of the written questions we received by July 11th. And I'm happy to hang out for as long as needed, but I'm not seeing any more hands. I think questions have kind of trickled down, so feel free to leave when you need to. And I really want to say thank you to everybody for attending today and for working with our really ambitious timelines. I know it's not fun to have a RFP drop out of the sky, especially as we're dealing with the beginning of a new fiscal year. So I appreciate your time and your efforts here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Jamie.
Of course.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Cheryl.
Of course. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, all right. Bye.
Derek, any lingering questions? All right. Okay, I'm gonna stop recording.